I'm about to tell you about a chilling experience that began on a frosty New Year's Eve, a night meant for celebration, but instead turned into something out of a nightmare. It was supposed to be a cozy holiday getaway. My family and I, my mom, my sister, and my cousin Rachel, had rented an old farmhouse at the edge of a sprawling forest to celebrate the new year. The house was picturesque during the day, with its snow-covered roof and vintage charm, but as the sun set and shadows crept in, it became something entirely different. From the moment we arrived, Rachel seemed unsettled. She claimed the guest room on the ground floor, a space that had once belonged to the original owners. "It feels heavy in here," she told me as we unpacked. I laughed it off, thinking she was overreacting. After all, old houses often carry a certain ambiance. The first evening passed without incident. We sipped hot cocoa by the fire, made jokes about New Year's resolutions, and stayed up late watching the stars. But as the clock struck midnight and we toasted to the coming year, Rachel's unease grew palpable. "It feels like someone's watching us," she whispered. "Probably just the trees," I replied, trying to lighten the mood. The farmhouse was surrounded by a dense forest, its skeletal branches reaching skyward like claws. At night, the shadows from the trees danced against the house, creating eerie patterns on the walls. Around 2 a.m., long after we had all gone to bed, a blood-curdling scream shattered the silence. I shot up, heart racing, and ran downstairs to Rachel's room, where the others had already gathered. We found her sitting on the bed, pale and shaking, clutching her blanket as though it were her lifeline. "She was there," Rachel stammered, pointing to the window. It was wide open, letting in the icy night air. None of us had opened it. "Who?" my mom asked, her voice trembling. "An old woman," Rachel said. She was staring at me through the glass. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow, and her hair, it was stringy and wet, like she'd just climbed out of the ground. We rushed to the window, but there was no sign of anyone. What we did find were deep, jagged scratches along the wooden frame, as though something with claws had tried to pry it open. On the windowsill lay a single black feather, glossy and unnaturally large. My mom tried to comfort Rachel, suggesting it might have been a trick of the light or a dream. But the scratches and the feather told a different story. Despite her terror, Rachel insisted on staying another night. The next evening, Rachel moved to an upstairs bedroom, convinced it would be safer. "At least I'll be farther from the window," she said. The rest of us went to bed early, hoping for a quiet night. But as the clock ticked past 2 a.m., we were awakened again, this time by Rachel's screams echoing through the house. We ran to her room, finding her huddled in the corner, her face pale as a sheet. "She was here," Rachel whispered, her voice barely audible. "At the foot of my bed. She was singing." "What do you mean, singing?" my sister asked, her voice laced with fear. "It was a lullaby," Rachel replied, her eyes wide. But it was wrong. The tune was off, like something you'd hear in a nightmare. And she smelled, like damp earth and flowers that had been left to rot. The description sent a chill down my spine. Rachel said the figure had worn a tattered black dress, and her bony hands had clutched a small, weathered book. The singing had stopped only when Rachel screamed. The next morning, we decided enough was enough. We began packing to leave, but the landlord arrived unexpectedly. He was an older man, his face weathered like the house itself. When we told him about Rachel's experiences, his expression darkened. "Sounds like Eleanor," he said, his voice low. Eleanor was the widow who used to live here. Her husband died tragically on New Year's Eve, hit by a carriage on his way home. She never got over it. Every New Year's Eve, she would sit by the window, singing the same sorrowful tune, waiting for him to return. "What happened to her?" my mom asked. "She passed away in this house," the landlord said. "But some say she never left. She doesn't like people staying here, especially on New Year's Eve. It's her night." The revelation left us all shaken. Rachel begged to leave immediately, and none of us argued. We packed our things and left the farmhouse before the sun could set again. But even as we drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that Eleanor wasn't finished with us. That night, back at home, as I lay in bed, I heard it, a faint, mournful melody drifting through the air. I checked the time, 2 a.m. Since then, every New Year's Eve, no matter where I am, I hear the same song. It's faint at first, but it grows louder, as if the singer is drawing closer. I've started to wonder, is she waiting for her husband, or has she decided I'll be her new companion? Who was Eleanor really, and why does she linger? Perhaps she's not waiting for anyone at all. Perhaps she's searching for something, or someone to take her place.